Okay, so I've got this new file open now, and I'll just point out some of the main things you want to check for. First thing is to make sure it's got the ground floor plan open. So in your project browser, over on the left here, you can see ground floor highlighted bold. And if you see something else, it might have level 1, then it means you've started with the wrong template, usually the American template, and you don't want that. So make sure it has ground floor, and then you can start drawing. And so, again, I've got this file open in AutoCAD. I'm going to save a copy so that you can all get to it on the P drive in Interior Design, CAD 2, and then I'm going to make a new folder called Elizabeth Street Office. And you can see it's called Project 2 Commercial Floor Plan. So now back into Revit, and before I insert this drawing, I'm going to duplicate my view. So make sure you know about this. You should have been doing it for the last project, but if you haven't yet, make sure you know you can right-click on any view, in this case ground floor, and then go to Duplicate View. And if you're not sure which option to use here, always use the middle one, Duplicate with Detailing. It copies the view. So once I've chosen it, you'll see now it's got a copy of ground floor. Going very slowly, but there we are, ground floor copy 1. And I'm going to right click on that copy and go to rename and call it ground floor DWG. So this is going to be the copy of the floor plan with my drawing file inserted. So now I'm going to go to the Insert tab and then click Import CAD. Then going to go to the folder I just showed you, and this is the most important setting. Over on the left, I'm going to tick Current View Only. So it's essential that you choose that option. If you don't, it'll cause lots of problems. Now, I'm going to also just change the units there to millimetres because I know the size it should be. You can always just check that if we measure. So there you can see it's in millimetres. So if you know the size, it's a good idea to set that in Revit rather than letting it guess. And then I'm just going to click Open. Okay, so I think it's going very slow just because it's got to send this to all the screens, but give that a moment. Let's leave that running actually, it'll just take a minute, and have a look again at the AutoCAD file. So you can see here we've got the column grid, which you saw was 600 in one direction, and then it'll be 1200 in the other direction. So that's a very standard measurement for a column grid like this. And we can set that out in a moment. And then between the columns, we'll have the spacing of our grid. But then you've also got the mullions there in between your windows. So we'll just get an idea of that spacing. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So you can see they're 1250 centres. So between each would be 1200, I'd say. Okay, so it's finished importing my plan, and notice it's gone off to the side. So I'm just going to select that and then drag it. So you'll see that once you've selected it, it'll probably come up with a pin icon. You can just click on that pin to unpin it. If you can't find the pin, you'll see up on the ribbon that you'll get an unpin icon there as well. So you just need to make sure it's selected, and you can unpin from there. Now I can drag it across so that it's roughly centered inside my 4 elevation views. Doesn't need to be exact, as long as it's inside those 4 views. And then I'm going to pin it again. So I want that to stay in place now. So on the Modify tab, you'll see you've got the pin button just below unpin, and that'll relock it. So you can see we've got the pin icon there again. Right, so I've imported the drawing, and remember I chose current view only. So if I look at the original ground floor, it's not in that view. It's just in the copy that I've made. And I'll start with the new tool that I'm going to show you, which is the grid tool. So I've looked at reference planes and levels before, which we're going to use in a moment, but you probably haven't used the grid tool. So I'm going to click on grid, and I'm going to zoom in and find a midpoint on one of the edges of these columns. We want the grids to be centered over the columns. So starting from the midpoint there, we'll center it. You're going to come up through all of these other columns, and you can see there it's going exactly through the midpoint of that column at the top. Some of the columns are offset from this grid or rotated, but that should still be a good center line for the column grid. Notice it's put a bubble at the top with the numbers there. And I'm just going to do the same thing with the next one. So you can see there, as I go to the bottom end of that grid line, I'm just stretching using that grip there, the open circle, to line it up with the end of the first one, just to keep things neat. And you'll see then you should get a padlock symbol, which shows you if you line them up that they'll be locked together, and that means when you adjust one of them, the other one should go together with it. So you can just keep tracing your grid lines off your plan that way, and you should then see the measurements do line up exactly with the dimensions from the drawing. Now, has anyone had a look at this building? No?
They're not able to. It's quite a real building. It's like an edited version of another floor plan.
Okay. Yeah, it's just that the dimensions are a bit odd, but we'll go with those. If this was a modern building, I'd say there's no way those dimensions would be right. I thought it might have been an older building, which might have been built with imperial measurements, but I don't think it's from before the 70s. Australia went metric in the 60s, so I know a lot of people kept using feet and inches after that, but in architecture it's been metric since basically since the 70s. So anything older than that, sometimes you'll find with those measurements, but not usually, and not usually anything more recent. So we're getting here even different dimensions again, which I'll refine in a moment. See how it's coming up with 6529.6. Don't worry too much about that at first, we'll just live with it, but something just to think about when you have unusual measurements turning up. Sometimes it's a good idea to change them a little bit. Now this last column is offset from the column above, so I'm just going to make a decision about how that's going to be set up. I think I'll go with the bottom. There's no other column up here anyway, and in fact, just wondering if we even need a grid there. You should really have grids for most of your columns, but I think in this case, as long as we only have one column there, we could skip that one and go to the next. Okay, so then it's common practice when you have a grid on the end of the building or the edge to have that grid line aligned with the outside face of the building, but it's not required, and so another option is just to have a different reference, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So it'll make your life easier if you do the grid like this, and then put a reference plane on the outside of the building to mark the outside face instead of moving the grid line over. And this is actually the European way. So in Commonwealth countries and in America, they use a different approach. They put the grids on the outside face, the last one. But European countries, I think, actually use a more sensible approach, which is to always centre the grid lines. So we've got to follow that approach. And so then I've got the grids going the other way, so I'm going to go into one of those columns there, and again just from the midpoint, deciding which way to go. I think we'll go to the right. So I want my grid bubbles to go outside over on the right over here. So I'm going to start on the left, find the midpoint of that column, and then go over to the right, and then just place the bubble out there. So notice the bubble always goes onto the second point that you choose. That's why I'm just making a decision about which way to draw. And I'm going to click on this bubble now and change that to A. Stretch this one out as well. Okay, so now notice how it's picked up that the last one was A, so now the next one is B. So again, just stretching these as I go. And if you take your time, make sure you get this set up right. It means everything else then can be tied back to this grid. Okay, so there we are, A to E is done, and I'll show you now the original ground floor plan. And notice that we can see the column grid, but not the drawing. And so that's the reason I usually like to duplicate a plan like this if I'm going to insert a drawing file. So I've got a copy with the drawing, one without. So unlike AutoCAD, where you could use a layer to do that and then turn the layer on and off as you're working, with Revit you don't have to, because you can have views set up with different graphics and just switch between them as you need to. So now I want to draw just a few more references in plan. So I'll use a reference plane for these. I'm going to draw over the outside edge of the building. So on each side I want to know where that exterior wall is. And where possible, extend the reference planes so that they cross at the corner. Right, so just the other one over here. And then I also want to mark the outside of the wall that is forming the edge of the space there. So let's drag this right up. So to there, and then across. Now, are you doing anything in this corridor? Or is that just... No, you're not. Yeah. So I'll probably show the core, but yeah, I'll be assuming you're just working with the tenancy area, so that's what I'll mark. And yep, just straight up. Okay, so now when I go back to my original ground floor plan, I can see those reference planes as well, and it's very clear then what the area is that I need to work within. So there are my plan constraints established, and now I just need to set up my elevational constraints, and we don't really have a lot to do here because we just have a floor level, and then you'll have a ceiling level, but that might be ceiling tiles or it might be the grid level, and you may be removing the tiles the way that they have been here. So that's an option, but either way you want to nominate that level, and then you need to nominate the level of the floor above as well. And that's it. So at the moment there'll be 2 levels, we just need to add 1 more, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to go to my south elevation, and you can see there we've got ground floor and level 1. So level 1 will be the floor above, and we don't know the height of that. The next floor? It could be. It might be a bit higher. I'd say it'd be a bit more, just looking at that. So the ceiling, do you know this ceiling height here? 2,900, is it? Okay, so I'd say it's at least 600 above, probably more. So anyhow, we can work that out later. The beauty of Revit is that you can use the levels to set the height. So I can leave that at 4,000 and then draw in a level in between. This is really the main step I just wanted to show you here. Again, left to right, so my tag goes to the second point, just like the grids. And then you're saying 2,900. Just make it 3,000. Just for the sake, 2,900 is a bit of a messy number. If it is 2,900, we can move it to that, but hopefully it is 3,000. And then I'm going to rename this, and we're actually on level 9, aren't we? So let's say level 9 CL, ceiling level. When you see this question, just say yes every time. Escape twice, and I can select ground floor. So it's going to be level 9 FL. Yes to rename, and then the next one, level 10 FL, floor level. Okay, so that's basically good enough for me to start working on the the physical elements, walls and floors mostly at first. I'm just going to do one extra step though to make it easier to read those numbers. Mainly, I'm going to change the scale to 1 to 50. So it'll make the text smaller and then won't overlap. I know I showed some of you that you can adjust the height of those tags, but sometimes it's easier just to change the scale. So that's it for now, and then next time we'll have a look at setting up your walls and floors and other things like that. Okay, so yeah, we've got the plan here in AutoCAD that is going to be the basis for your design, and we want to now get that set up in Revit so that you can then start modelling your design in 3D. So if you're on the welcome screen there, you can go straight to architectural template, and if you're not sure that's the template that you should always be using it first. If you have a file open, you can always go to the main menu and then go to new project, and then from the list there choose architectural template. That's the same thing. And it's opening off the network, so might be a little bit slower than usual, but in a moment we should have a new file. While that's happening, I might just switch back to AutoCAD and talk about the main elements we're going to look at. So we've got here just a part plan of this level. I'd be assuming that it's at least double this size, the whole floor plate. But this is all we need to model. So we've got there the column grid, which we need to set out. And then we're going to look at setting out the exterior walls, and then also the core. So over here on the left, the lift shaft and everything else.